Hey everybody, Sled Driver 1 here again. Today I'm going to go over a little bit of stuff on real vague general adjustments that we might make for one class or another. Try not to get real specific. There's no secrets to it among pullers, so to speak, but between this sled and that sled, a setting for this one or adjustment for this one is not necessarily going to work for a different one sled. Even though it might be built by the same person, you can build two side by side, one piece at a time, and each one's going to be just a little bit different than the other, have their own characteristics. So just because it works for one doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for the other, especially from place to place and different tracks. One main thing that we don't really, once we get it set, we don't really change anymore, unless you just got some really bad conditions. Those frame rail stops. Now the airbags are aired up, so it's sitting down right now. It's got two pinholes up top there. Try to show you this. Well, that will push up in there when you dump the bags and sets down on it. One in the front, one in the back on each side. The pinholes are offset. You can set them at different heights, and that pretty much controls your balance point on the sled, more or less. By this front axle will make the front of the pan heavier, lighter, whatever you want to do for one class to the other. And like I said, I don't have any pins or anything in mind right now because I don't usually adjust it a whole lot unless you're just pulling something weird or got a really bad track. Up in here, I call it the go fast switch, the trip switch. I got it slid all the way forward here. Most smaller stuff, it'll never move from up there. There is a point, just depends on what kind of track you got and how good the stuff is, where you take your trusty little Craftsman 9/16 wrench here, loosen the set screw, and slide her back. The further back you put that, the quicker the bolt sticking out of the box there, you can see, will catch the whiskers there and drop the pan. Now all that does is put the pan into float. Doesn't actually, weight does the work of pushing the pan into the ground. That's all that does, just puts it into float. Push that back up front just because I kind of like it there. And I call it the go fast switch because the further forward you can leave it, the further it'll hold that pan up to keep from adding resistance to it and let them run a little faster through the middle. Then you got to have enough to stop them with. Up front, the rollers on the bar there, hooked to the roller chain that comes back and pulls the rack, as I call it. Over here, these two switches activate our push down system. Over here, there's actually three switches. Two are what kicks the clutch out of gear, and one is what holds the green light on when the box is all the way forward to keep it flashing. As far as the actual push down system, that's it. These two cylinders here. And they will, once the box hits the front, they'll extend upward, push on the bottom of the frame rail. That's what picks the back of the sled up when you stop. A lot of times if we got a lot of weight in the box, you'll see all 8 tires are hanging in midair spinning. And how hard you push and that kind of thing depends on, there's the front of it, it's underneath this bracket, the accumulator. That's a Parker 5-gallon capacity bladder style accumulator. And underneath there, it's turned the opposite way, you got to lay down on the pan to see it on this one, is the pressure gauge. Now that's just oil pressure. That in there, where that hex-headed dust cap is, that is the end where the Schrader valve sticks out to add or subtract nitrogen pressure. You use nitrogen in there so it doesn't change for temperatures, just like your car tires or whatever. But a lot of times people ask how much down pressure you're running. Well, I could tell you all day long how much oil pressure I got, but if you don't know how much nitrogen pressure is in here, it really doesn't matter. And I'm not going to get real specific on nitrogen pressures. If you know, you know. But you got to understand how all that works. The nitrogen's the spring that pushes the oil through to the cylinders. So that's about all the adjustment stuff there is up here. That valve right there with the 4-way handle, that's a needle valve that controls the speed of the pan drop. And that's something else there. If you know, you know. I don't never really adjust that. Once it's set, it's set. Going back here. If you've seen my other video on the drive line, there's our 5-speed gearbox. First gear with the box all the way back in this sled, meaning those movable stops are not in the frame rail. She'll back all the way up to those other set of rubber stops. Box all the way back in first gear, and this sled will top out somewhere around 260 feet. And then high gear, 5th gear, is somewhere about 200, 190. Never really run it in 5th gear with the box all the way back. The block out stops, some people call it preloading the box, just changes. If you start all the way back, they're sitting at 2 holes right now. I can move them 2 more holes forward, and more or less I use that as a balancing point with the sled. The more weight you got in the box, the further forward it might need to start for a bigger vehicle to hold the pan down, to give them enough drawbar chain angle to get took off on a decent track. And also it's kind of a double-edged sword. When you start it further forward, not only to put more weight on the front of the pan, it'll also make the box top out quicker. Now, different gears, it changes that. In first gear, it might speed it up 15 feet. In high gear, who knows how fast it'll actually speed it up. So it's kind of proportionate to what gear you're in. And of course, the weight's in the box. Now, if I can get back far enough here, this is 1/2 of the weight box. Holds 5 weights on each side. And the middle here, now the sled itself's only 96 inches wide. These weights are 12 by 12 mostly, except for these 2 that go in here, and I'll show you them up here in the front. So, and there's the brackets. You can put a weight up here in the nose weight between the rails. That's usually just like a 2-wheel drive thing, some tractor classes. And our brackets back here on the back of the pan, that's usually more or less just for big mods and semis. This helps get the bars under the pan in the ground a little faster. I've only got 8 weights on the truck here right now. These 2 red weights here, well, they're actually kind of pink right now. Sun's faded them out. These weights are only 10 inches wide. They're 12 inches tall, but they're only 10 inches wide. And their purpose is to fit in that middle hole back there, because the box isn't wide enough for all that and still fit under the cab. Those 2 are about 1,500 pounds a piece. So it's more or less like a 3/4 weight. The 2 of them together, if you want to get real technical, are about a 1.5 weights. Our full-size 12-inch weights, 12 by 12 weights here, and all the weights are more or less about 35 inches long. The big black weights here are about 1,900 pounds. And there's only 8 on the truck here. Normally there would be 2 more black ones sitting here outside of those, or a total of 10. 10 weights, the scales and stuff, puts me right at my limit for 80,000 pounds going down the road. So obviously you go somewhere to run semis or mods, you got extra weights, or a backup sled, and you got more weights. You can, if you fill up every hole on it, which is a pretty rare occasion, is 15 weights. And that's got to be pretty tough sledding to do all that. You got to be in a situation where you're just having to give them everything you got to get them stopped. You don't have to do that very often. And the sled itself weighs about 30,000 pounds empty. Each weight, like I said, other than those 2 there, 1,500 a piece. Each of the rest of these are close to 2,000 pounds. So you can do the math on that. You really load one up, you can get it close to 60,000 pounds. And one more thing, down. People ask about the teeth, the bars. This one's full of dirt right now from the last pull I did. And these are half wore out in my opinion. These are about 2 inches, 2¼ inches tall right now. When they're brand new on this sled, they're about 3 inches tall. There are 14 of them under here, and they're bolted in place. The brackets they're bolted to are welded under here. You can't raise them, you can't lower them. They're here all the time. And on these sleds, as long as you pay attention and think about what you're doing, you can run antique tractors, you can run street stock 4-wheel drive pickups and turn around, load it up and do adjusting, and turn around and pull a 4-engine modified. Of course, it all depends on the weights, or depends on the tracks, what type of vehicle you're pulling, and what you want, how fast you want to go, and if you got enough to get them stopped. If the track will hold the bars and hold the sled, then usually we can get up and go pretty good, and I can snatch them out of the ground at the other end. I like 30 mile an hour and faster. Sometimes the tracks won't let us do it. So that's roughly in a nutshell what we do, or what I do. Each sled's different, each track is different, and what works for one won't necessarily work for another. Thanks for watching, and we'll go over some more stuff again later someday.